Lieutenant Jake Morrison stared at his console screen aboard the colony ship Horizon Dawn and saw something that made his stomach turn. A faint distress signal blinked on the edge of his sensor array, barely visible through the electromagnetic interference that plagued this godforsaken planet. Kepler 442b was supposed to be humanity's new hope, a fresh start for the overcrowded Earth. But 3 years into the mission and all they had found was disappointment and danger. The planet's atmosphere was toxic, its weather patterns were violent, and its magnetic fields played havoc with their equipment. Most of the crew had given up on finding anything worthwhile here. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the signal again. His shift was almost over and he could easily log it as another false positive. The planet was littered with debris from failed survey missions and automated probes that had crashed over the years. 9 times out of 10, these signals were just pieces of junk sending out automatic distress calls long after their crews had died or evacuated. But something about this one felt different. The pattern was irregular, almost like someone was manually triggering it. Jake had learned to trust his instincts during his time in space, and his instincts were screaming at him that this was real. He pulled up the coordinates and felt his heart sink. The signal was coming from the middle of Lake Methane 7, one of the largest and most dangerous bodies of liquid on the planet. The lake wasn't water but a churning mixture of methane, ammonia, and other chemicals that would eat through standard protective gear in minutes. The surface was constantly covered in toxic fog, and lightning storms rolled across it almost continuously. No rescue mission had ever been authorized for that region. It was considered a death sentence. Jake looked around the bridge. Captain Linda Harris was in her ready room going over supply reports. Chief Engineer Daniel Cooper was asleep in his quarters after pulling a double shift. Security Chief Greg Patterson was doing his rounds on the lower decks. Everyone was busy or tired or both. If Jake reported this signal, it would go through official channels, get reviewed by committee, and probably be dismissed as too dangerous to investigate. By the time any decision was made, whoever was sending that signal would be dead. He made his decision in less than 30 seconds. Jake transferred his console to automatic monitoring, grabbed his personal communicator, and headed for the shuttle bay. He was breaking about a dozen regulations, but he had not joined the colonial fleet to sit safely on a ship while people died. His father had been a rescue worker back on Earth, pulling people out of collapsed buildings and flood zones. The old man had always said that hesitation killed more people than action ever did. Jake figured if he was going to get court-martialed, he might as well make it count for something. The shuttle bay was empty when he arrived. Jake ran through the pre-flight checklist faster than he probably should have, but every second counted. He loaded the shuttle with emergency medical supplies, extra oxygen tanks, and the best environmental suit they had. The suit was designed to withstand corrosive atmospheres for up to an hour, though the manufacturer's warnings made it clear that was a theoretical maximum under ideal conditions. Jake had no illusions about ideal conditions. The shuttle launched with a soft hum of engines. Jake punched in the coordinates and let the autopilot handle most of the flying while he suited up. The environmental suit was bulky and uncomfortable, with synthetic muscle fibers that augmented his strength and a heads-up display that fed him information about his surroundings. He checked the seals 3 times, knowing that one tiny breach would be fatal in the environment he was heading into. The descent through the planet's atmosphere was rough. Violent winds buffeted the shuttle, and purple lightning arced across the sky in patterns that seemed almost alive. Jake gripped the controls and fought to keep the shuttle steady. His display showed external temperatures swinging wildly from freezing to boiling as they passed through different atmospheric layers. This was why most pilots refused to fly solo missions to the surface. This was why Jake had not told anyone where he was going. Lake Methane 7 appeared below him like a vision from a nightmare. The liquid surface was a swirling mass of green and orange, chemical reactions creating constantly shifting patterns. Fog rolled across it in thick banks, and the air above it shimmered with heat and electromagnetic distortions. Jake's sensors could barely penetrate the interference, but he could make out a shape floating near the center of the lake. It was an escape pod, old and battered, half-submerged, and taking on liquid fast. Jake brought the shuttle down as close as he dared, hovering about 10 meters above the lake surface. He could hear the corrosive liquid hissing against the shuttle's hull even through the thick walls. His suit's computer was throwing up warnings about atmospheric composition and radiation levels. Jake ignored them all. He locked the shuttle's position activated the emergency beacon so the Horizon Dawn would know where to find his body if this went wrong, and opened the airlock. The heat hit him first, even through the environmental suit. Then the smell, acrid and burning, seeping through his air filters. Jake clipped a safety line to the shuttle and dove toward the escape pod. His suit's synthetic muscles activated, giving him strength beyond human normal, but fighting through the thick atmosphere was like swimming through syrup. Lightning cracked overhead, close enough that he could feel the static electricity making his hair stand on end inside his helmet. The escape pod was worse than he had feared. Its hull was breached in multiple places, and the corrosive lake liquid was pouring inside. Jake grabbed the emergency handle and wrenched the door open. His suit's lights cut through the murky interior, and that was when he saw her. She was humanoid, but clearly not human. Her skin had a golden sheen even through the chemical sludge coating her, and intricate patterns like circuit boards ran up her arms and neck. Her face was marked with geometric designs that seemed to glow faintly, reminding Jake of old photographs he had seen of Apache warriors with traditional face paint. She was unconscious and barely breathing. Jake's suit computer analyzed her and came back with error messages. Unknown species, unknown physiology, unknown biology. Helpful. He wrapped his arms around her and pulled her free from the wreckage. She was lighter than he expected, her body temperature far too low. Jake activated his suit's emergency heat function and held her close to his chest, hoping his body warmth might help stabilize her. Getting back to the shuttle was harder than getting down. The alien woman was dead weight in his arms, and the safety line could only do so much. Jake's muscles burned even with the suit's assistance. The lake liquid was eating away at his suit's outer coating, and his computer was counting down the minutes until breach. 58 minutes when he started. 41 minutes now. He had to move faster. Jake practically threw himself and his passenger into the shuttle's airlock. The door sealed behind them with a hiss, and decontamination spray flooded the chamber. Jake stripped off his outer suit layer and carried the alien woman to the shuttle's small medical bay. He laid her on the diagnostic table and watched as the computer struggled to make sense of her biology. Her vital signs were all over the place, dropping toward nothing. She was dying right in front of him. Jake did the only thing he could think of. He started treating her like she was human. He wrapped her in heated blankets to bring her temperature up. He set up an IV drip with a basic saline solution, hoping her body would accept it or at least not reject it violently. He used a chelation agent designed to remove heavy metals from human blood, gambling that it might help flush the toxic chemicals from her system. It was all guesswork, but doing something felt better than watching her die. The flight back to the Horizon Dawn took 30 minutes. Jake spent all of it working on his patient, adjusting treatments, monitoring her responses. Slowly, impossibly, her vital signs began to stabilize. Her temperature started climbing back toward normal, whatever normal was for her species. The patterns on her skin began to glow more brightly, pulsing with a rhythm that Jake realized matched her heartbeat. She was fighting to survive, and his makeshift medical care was giving her the edge she needed. Her eyes opened when they were 5 minutes from the Horizon Dawn. They were the most striking amber color Jake had ever seen, glowing with an internal light that made him catch his breath. She looked at him with an intensity that seemed to pierce straight through to his soul. Her lips moved and sound came out, musical and strange. The shuttle's translator tried to make sense of it and managed only fragments. Life debt. Saved. Bound. Yours. Forever. Jake had no idea what she meant. He was just relieved she was alive. He smiled at her and tried to project calm and safety. "Everything is going to be okay," he said, not knowing if she could understand. "You are safe now. I am Jake. You are going to be fine." The alien woman reached up with one hand and touched his face. Her fingers were warm, and he felt a strange tingling sensation where she made contact, like a mild electric current running through his skin. Her amber eyes never left his face, and Jake had the uncomfortable feeling that she was looking deeper than just his physical appearance. She was seeing something inside him, measuring him, judging him. The airlock of the Horizon Dawn opened with a hiss of pressurized air, and Jake guided the floating stretcher carrying his unconscious passenger into the ship's medical bay. Dr. Ellen Park was already waiting, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of professional curiosity and barely concealed alarm. Behind her stood Captain Linda Harris, arms crossed, her expression somewhere between relief that Jake was alive and fury that he had taken an unauthorized shuttle on a suicide mission. Security Chief Greg Patterson had his hand resting on his sidearm, though Jake hoped that was just habit rather than actual preparation to shoot someone. "We will discuss your blatant disregard for protocol later," Lieutenant Captain Harris said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Right now I want to know what exactly you brought back with you." Dr. Park stepped forward, her scanner already out and sweeping over the alien woman. The readings made her frown. "I am getting contradictory data. Her cellular structure is unlike anything in our database. These patterns on her skin appear to be some kind of biomechanical interface. She is alive, that much is certain, but beyond that I would be guessing." Jake moved to stand beside the examination table, and that was when things got interesting. The alien woman's eyes snapped open, glowing bright amber in the sterile white light of the medical bay. She sat up faster than anyone could react, her movements fluid and precise. Before anyone could even think to stop her, she had positioned herself between Jake and the rest of the room, her body language screaming threat and protection in equal measure. The temperature in the medical bay dropped noticeably, and the overhead lights flickered as if responding to some invisible energy field. "Easy," Jake said, raising his hand slowly. "These are friends. They want to help you. No one here is going to hurt you." The alien woman turned her head slightly to look at him, those amber eyes studying his face as if trying to read his intentions. The patterns on her skin pulsed with soft golden light, and Jake felt that same tingling sensation he had experienced in the shuttle, as if she was somehow scanning him on a level deeper than physical. After a moment that felt like hours, she relaxed fractionally but did not move from her protective stance. Dr. Park cleared her throat carefully. "I need to examine her properly. We need to understand her physiology to make sure she is recovering correctly. Jake, can you ask her to cooperate?" Jake had no idea how to ask her anything since they did not share a language yet, but he tried anyway. "Will you let the doctor examine you? She just wants to make sure you are healthy." The alien woman tilted her head, and Jake got the distinct impression she understood him better than his words should allow. She nodded once, sharp and decisive, but when Dr. Park tried to approach, she moved smoothly to stay between the doctor and Jake. It became clear very quickly that any examination would have to happen with Jake present. The alien woman would not allow anyone to separate her from him by more than a few feet. When Chief Engineer Daniel Cooper tried to enter the medical bay to see what all the fuss was about, she hissed at him, an eerie sound that seemed to resonate at frequencies that made everyone's teeth ache. Cooper backed out quickly, muttering something about not getting paid enough for this. Over the next several hours, Dr. Park conducted her examination as best she could with a very protective alien, watching her every move. The results were fascinating and more than a little alarming. The woman's biology was carbon-based like humans, but there the similarities ended. Her cells operated at a quantum level, existing in multiple states simultaneously until observed. The circuit-like patterns on her skin were indeed technological, living interfaces that connected her nervous system to some kind of universal data network. She could, in theory, interact with any electronic system just by touching it. Captain Harris listened to the report with growing concern. "So we have an alien with the ability to control any of our ship's systems aboard the Horizon Dawn, and she has apparently bonded herself to one of my officers." Dr. Park nodded. "The bonding appears to be biological. Her species might have some kind of imprinting mechanism. Lieutenant Morrison saved her life, so she has designated him as her primary focus. She perceives him as both protector and charge. It is actually quite fascinating from an evolutionary standpoint." Jake was less concerned with the evolutionary implications and more worried about the practical ones. "How do we communicate with her? Can we learn her language?" The ship's universal translator had been working overtime, collecting data every time the alien woman made a sound. By the end of the first day, it had enough information to begin basic translations. The alien woman's name, as close as human vocal cords could approximate it, was something like Nova. She seemed amused by their attempts to pronounce her actual name, which involved harmonics and ultrasonic frequencies humans could not produce. "Nova," Jake repeated, and she nodded, her face markings brightening with what he was learning to interpret as pleasure. The breakthrough in communication came later that evening when Jake was trying to explain to her what the Horizon Dawn was and why they were here. Nova listened intently, and then she placed her hand flat against the wall of the medical bay. The patterns on her skin lit up brilliantly, and suddenly the wall display activated. showing a three-dimensional star map with a level of detail that made their own navigation systems look primitive. She was from a civilization called the Keshtar, a name that the translator rendered from her direct interface with the ship's computer. Her people had been exploring the galaxy for thousands of years, long before humans had even discovered fire. They were few in number now, scattered across the stars on various research missions. Nova had been part of a survey team studying anomalies in this region of space when they encountered something she called the Void Corruption. Her ship had been destroyed, her crew lost, and she had crashed on Kepler 442b, where she would have died if not for Jake's intervention. The crew of the Horizon Dawn tried to give Nova space, to encourage her to explore the ship and interact with others. She was not interested. She followed Jake everywhere, to the mess hall where she studied human food with intense fascination but did not eat, subsisting instead on some kind of energy drink that Dr. Park formulated based on her cellular analysis. To the observation deck where Nova would stand for hours watching the stars, her expression sad and distant. To engineering, where Chief Engineer Cooper complained that her presence was disrupting the equipment, until Jake pointed out that the antimatter containment field was running smoother than it ever had. At night, Nova stood guard outside Jake's quarters. He tried to tell her she did not need to, that she should rest, but she simply looked at him with those glowing amber eyes and shook her head. The first time Jake woke up in the middle of the night and found her sitting in the corner of his room, her bioluminescence dimmed to a soft glow that painted strange shadows on the walls. He nearly had a heart attack. Nova explained, through the improving translator, that she could feel when he was in distress even in sleep. His nightmares woke her. She wanted to be close enough to help if he needed her. Jake found himself fascinated by her in ways that had nothing to do with her alien nature. She was intelligent, picking up human language and customs with startling speed. She had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard. When Greg Patterson made a joke about Jake having a very dedicated bodyguard, Nova responded that she had seen Jake's combat scores and agreed he needed one. The comment made the entire bridge crew laugh, and Jake saw Nova's face markings pulse with warm light, as if his laughter pleased her. But there were moments when her alien nature became impossible to ignore. The way she moved was too smooth, too precise, like a dancer who never missed a step. Her eyes saw in spectrums humans could not perceive. She could hear conversations happening 3 corridors away. And sometimes when she touched the ship's systems, Jake could swear he saw her become part of them, her consciousness spreading through the circuits like water flowing through cracks. 2 weeks after her rescue, Jake woke from a nightmare about the toxic lake, about watching Nova die despite everything he had done. He sat up gasping and found her kneeling beside his bed, her hand already reaching for his. Your heart rate increased. You were afraid. Jake tried to wave it off. Just a bad dream. Nova's grip on his hand tightened. You fear losing what you have saved. This is natural. But understand, Jake Morrison, I am not easily killed. It took the destruction of my ship and a toxic lake to bring me close to death. I will not leave you to face your nightmares alone. It was the longest speech she had made in human language, and Jake felt something shift in his chest. This was not just about a life debt anymore. This was about something neither of them had words for yet. 3 weeks into Nova's stay aboard the Horizon Dawn, Jake started noticing changes in himself. Small things at first. He could look at a control panel and understand its function without reading the labels. When he walked into engineering, he could sense the flow of power through the conduits like heat radiating from a fire. His reaction times had improved, fast enough that Greg Patterson commented on it during their weekly sparring session. It was like his brain was rewiring itself, building new connections that had never existed before. Dr. Park ran tests and confirmed his suspicions. Your neural pathways are forming new patterns, she explained, showing him brain scans that lit up like Christmas trees in areas that should have been dormant. The connection with Nova is changing you on a fundamental level. Not enough to make you non-human, but enough to give you abilities that border on the superhuman. Jake did not know whether to be excited or terrified. Both, probably. Nova noticed the changes, too. She watched him with growing fascination as he started to perceive the world more like she did. One evening in the observation deck, she placed her hand over his and suddenly Jake could see the electromagnetic spectrum the way she did. The ship blazed with light invisible to normal human eyes, currents of power flowing through every system like blood through veins. It was beautiful and overwhelming and more than a little frightening. "This is how you see all the time?" he asked, and Nova nodded. "This is reality, Jake Morrison. What your eyes show you is only a tiny fraction of what exists." The bond between them deepened with each passing day. Jake found himself thinking about her at odd moments, wondering if she was comfortable, if she was happy, if she missed her own people. He caught himself watching her when she was not looking, studying the way her markings pulsed when she was concentrating on something, the way she tilted her head when she was amused. And Nova, for her part, had stopped simply following him and started actively seeking his company. She asked his opinions on things, valued his perspective even though her knowledge base was vastly superior to his. She had started learning human customs not out of necessity, but because she wanted to understand him better. When the crew celebrated a birthday in the mess hall, Nova insisted on participating. She watched humans sing and eat cake and give gifts with an intensity that made Jake realize she was studying more than just customs. She was studying the connections between people, the bonds of friendship and camaraderie that held the crew together. "Your species survives because of this," she said quietly, standing beside him as they watched the party. "You form packs, families, units. You support each other even when logic says you should conserve resources. The Keshtar stopped doing this. We became independent, self-sufficient, and in doing so we became lonely." It was the saddest thing Jake had ever heard her say. The next morning, Captain Harris called Jake to her ready room. He expected another lecture about protocol, but instead the captain looked tired. "I need to know if you are compromised, Lieutenant. Your connection to Nova runs deeper than we initially thought. If it came down to a choice between her and the ship, which would you choose?" Jake wanted to give her the answer she needed to hear. He wanted to say the ship, always the ship. But he had never lied to his captain, and he was not about to start now. "I do not know," he admitted. "Nova has proven herself as valuable as any crew member. She saved us when she helped optimize the engine systems. She has shared technology that will benefit all of humanity. But yes, the bond is real, and it affects my judgment. If I had to choose between her life and the ship, I honestly cannot tell you what I would do." Captain Harris studied him for a long moment. "I appreciate your honesty. For what it is worth, I do not think that situation will arise. Nova has shown nothing but loyalty. But Jake, you are charting new territory here. There are no manuals for human-alien bonding. You are going to have to figure this out as you go." The conversation left Jake unsettled. He found Nova in engineering, helping Daniel Cooper recalibrate the antimatter injectors. She looked up as he entered, her markings brightening automatically in his presence, and Jake felt that now familiar electric tingle of their connection. "We need to talk," he said, and Nova nodded. She excused herself from Cooper and followed Jake to one of the empty storage bays where they could have privacy. "The captain asked me if I could choose the ship over you if it came to it," Jake said without preamble. Nova was quiet for a moment, her expression unreadable. "And what did you tell her?" "The truth. That I do not know." Nova stepped closer, taking his hand in hers. The patterns on her arm glowed brighter where their skin touched. "I would choose you," she said softly. "Over my own life, over my species' survival, over everything. The bond works both ways, Jake. You saved me, and now I cannot imagine existing without you." The admission should have terrified him. It should have made him pull away, establish professional distance. Instead, Jake found himself squeezing her hand, acknowledging the truth they had both been dancing around for weeks. "This is not just about a life debt, is it?" he said. Nova shook her head. "Life debts are paid and concluded. What I feel for you goes beyond obligation. You showed me that there is still value in connection, in caring about another being more than you care about yourself. My people forgot this, and it is killing them. You reminded me of it, and now I cannot go back to being alone." The moment was interrupted by klaxons blaring throughout the ship. Captain Harris's voice came over the intercom, urgent and sharp. "All hands to battle stations. We have incoming vessels, multiple contacts. They are not responding to hails." Jake and Nova ran for the bridge. When they arrived, the view screen showed a sight that made Nova freeze in her tracks. Dozens of ships, sleek and beautiful, arranged in a complex formation that spoke of incredible coordination. They bore markings that Jake did not recognize, but that clearly meant something to Nova. Her face had gone pale, her markings flickering erratically. "Keshtar," she whispered. "My people have found me." The bridge of the Horizon Dawn was silent except for the soft beeping of sensors and the quiet hum of life support systems. Every eye was on the view screen where the Keshtar fleet maintained its position, close enough to be threatening, but not close enough to be in immediate danger. Captain Harris stood at her command chair, her posture rigid with tension. Jake stood beside Nova, close enough that their shoulders touched and he could feel the tremors running through her body. "Lieutenant, what can you tell us about these ships?" Captain Harris asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Are they hostile?" Nova shook her head slowly. "Not hostile, protective. The Keshatar do not wage war. We have not needed to for thousands of years, but they will not leave without me." Her voice was barely above a whisper, and Jake heard the conflict in every word. "This is your people," he said quietly. "The ones you have been separated from. Do you want to go back to them?" Before Nova could answer, the main view screen activated and a figure appeared. They looked similar to Nova, but older, with more intricate patterns covering their skin that glowed with a cool blue light instead of amber. Their expression was difficult to read, somewhere between relief and concern. "Scout Nova," the figure said, their voice melodic and strange even through the universal translator. "We traced your emergency beacon when it reactivated. Your mission was deemed lost. We are pleased you survived. Prepare for extraction. The medical teams are standing by to reverse the bonding damage." Jake felt Nova stiffen beside him. The elder continued speaking, apparently not noticing or not caring about Nova's reaction. "We understand you have formed a survival bond with one of the primitive species on that vessel. This is unfortunate but not unexpected given your circumstances. Such bonds can be severed with minimal trauma through our medical procedures. You will be restored to your full independence and can resume your duties." The casual dismissal of what he and Nova shared made Jake's jaw tighten, but he kept his mouth shut. This was not his place to speak. This was Nova's choice, and whatever she decided, he would support it. Nova stepped forward, pulling Jake with her so they stood together facing the view screen. "Elder Vex," she said, and Jake heard steel in her voice that had not been there before. "I will not be returning." The statement seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the bridge. Even Captain Harris looked surprised. The elder's markings flickered rapidly, a sign of what Jake was learning to interpret as agitation. "Scout Nova, you are not thinking clearly. The bond has compromised your judgment. That is precisely why extraction and treatment are necessary. You have a duty to your species. We are few enough already. We cannot afford to lose you to some primitive attachment." Now Nova's markings flared bright, and the temperature in the bridge dropped several degrees. The overhead lights flickered. "I have found what I was sent to find," she said, her voice rising. "You tasked me with discovering why humanity thrives while we fade. I have the answer. But it is not something that can be extracted and analyzed like data. It cannot be reverse-engineered or replicated in a laboratory." She gestured to Jake, to Captain Harris, to the crew around them. "They survive because they refuse to let go. They form bonds that seem irrational, inefficient, even painful. But those bonds give them strength we have forgotten we could have. When I was dying in toxic water, this human risked his life to save me. He did not calculate the odds. He did not debate the value. He acted because letting someone die when he could help was unthinkable to him." The elder's expression remained unreadable. "Then you choose to remain with these primitives rather than return to your own kind. You would abandon the Keshatar for one individual." Nova's hand tightened on Jake's. "I choose to learn what it means to truly live again. The bond you think is my weakness is the first real strength I have felt in my entire life. I am not compromised, Elder Vex. I am for the first time complete." Jake wanted to speak, wanted to tell her that she did not have to choose him over her entire species, but the words stuck in his throat. Because the truth was, he did not want her to leave. The thought of Nova walking away, of losing her, felt like losing a part of himself. Other figures appeared on subsidiary screens, more Keshatar, their faces showing emotion that Jake had rarely seen from Nova's people. Confusion, concern, fear. They were watching their civilization die, and now one of their few survivors was refusing to return. Elder Vex was silent for a long moment. "Then you are lost to us. The Keshtar do not force our people against their will. We will not interfere." The transmission began to close, but Nova raised her hand. "Wait, you do not have to lose me, and I do not have to lose you. The answer to our species' decline is not going to be found by studying humanity from a distance. It is going to be found by learning to form these bonds ourselves, even if they are messy and irrational and terrifying." She looked at Captain Harris. "What if we proposed an exchange program? Keshtar observers on human vessels, human representatives on yours, not as specimens to study but as partners, as friends, living examples of what connection can look like. Captain Harris raised an eyebrow but nodded slowly. I would need to clear it with Colonial Command, but I am not opposed to the idea. We have much to learn from your people, and apparently, you have something to learn from us. The elder considered this an exchange, a cultural integration program. It is unconventional. It is unprecedented. But the patterns on their face began to glow warmer, and Jake realized they were intrigued. Very well, we will attempt this experiment. 3 Keshtar observers will remain with your vessel. Scout Nova and 1 human representative will accompany us. Jake felt his heart sink. Nova was going with them. Of course she was. She needed to help her people, to teach them what she had learned. He started to let go of her hand, but she held on tighter. I will go, Nova said. But only if Jake Morrison comes with me. He is the example I need to show my people. He is the proof that bonds are strength, not weakness. Captain Harris looked at Jake. Lieutenant, this is volunteer only. If you do not want to go, no one will force you. It would mean months, maybe years, living among an alien civilization. But Jake was already nodding. If Nova needs me there, then that is where I will be. The elder's expression shifted to something that might have been approval. Very well. The exchange will commence in 1 standard week. That will give us time to prepare accommodations and brief our people on human requirements. Elder Vex out. The view screen went dark and the bridge erupted in quiet conversation. Captain Harris motioned for Jake and Nova to follow her to the ready room. You realize what you are volunteering for, the captain said once the door was closed. You will be the first human to live among the Keshatar. There are no protocols for this. No support structure. You will be completely on your own. Jake glanced at Nova, who was watching him with those amber eyes that saw so much. I will not be alone, he said. I will have her. And apparently, that is enough. The week before the exchange passed in a blur of preparation and training. Dr. Park ran Jake through a battery of tests to establish his baseline physiology, so the Keshatar would know what was normal for humans and what was medical emergency. Greg Patterson gave him a crash course in diplomatic protocol, though much of it was guesswork since no one had ever negotiated with the Keshatar before. Captain Harris provided him with data drives containing human history, culture, and technology, things the Keshatar might want to understand about the species they were hosting. But the most important preparation came from Nova herself. She spent hours teaching Jake about her people, about their customs and expectations, about the ways they communicated that went beyond simple language. The Keshatar are not cold, she explained one evening as they sat in the observation deck watching the alien ships maintain their vigil outside. We are reserved. We do not show emotion easily because for so long we have not felt much to show, but that does not mean we do not feel at all. When you meet my people, you will need to understand that silence does not mean disapproval, and lack of visible reaction does not mean lack of interest. Jake tried to absorb it all, but the truth was he felt completely unprepared. He was going to be living among beings who had been traveling the stars for millennia, who saw reality in ways he could barely comprehend, who considered human technology primitive at best. What if I mess this up, he asked Nova quietly. What if I say or do something that offends them, or makes them think humans are not worth their time? Nova smiled and her markings pulsed warmly. Then you will apologize and learn from it. That is what makes humans valuable, Jake. You are willing to make mistakes and grow from them. The Keshatar became so focused on perfection that we stopped trying new things. We stopped risking failure. You will show them that failure is not the end but the beginning of understanding. The day of the exchange arrived too quickly. Jake packed light, bringing only essentials and the data drives Captain Harris had given him. He said his goodbyes to the crew, enduring backslaps from Daniel Cooper, and a surprisingly emotional handshake from Greg Patterson. Captain Harris pulled him aside for a final word. You are representing all of humanity out there, Lieutenant. I know that is a hell of a burden to carry, but I also know that if anyone can do it, you can. Make us proud. The shuttle ride to the Keshtar flagship was surreal. The alien ship was massive, easily 10 times the size of the Horizon Dawn, and its design was unlike anything in human experience. It looked organic, as if it had been grown rather than built, with flowing curves and surfaces that seemed to shift and change as Jake watched. Nova piloted the shuttle with casual confidence, her hands moving across controls that responded to her touch in ways that human interfaces never could. This is the luminous path, she said as they approached the docking bay, one of the eldest ships in the fleet. It has been traveling the galaxy for over 5,000 of your years. 5,000 years. Jake tried to wrap his mind around that and failed. The oldest human structure still standing was less than a tenth of that age. He was about to board a ship that had been exploring space since before human recorded history began. The docking procedure was smooth, and when the airlock opened, Jake got his first look at the interior of a Keshatar vessel. It was breathtaking. The walls seemed to glow with soft internal light, and the air had a quality to it that Jake could not quite describe. Clean and crisp and somehow alive. Patterns of light flowed through what must have been control systems, but they looked more like art than technology. And the Keshatar themselves were there to greet them. A dozen of them, all variations on Nova's appearance, with different pattern arrangements and different colored bioluminescence. They studied Jake with undisguised curiosity, their eyes scanning him in ways that made him feel like he was being examined down to the molecular level. Elder Vex stepped forward, the same one who had spoken to them from the viewscreen. "Welcome to the Luminous Path, human Jake Morrison. You are the first of your species to walk these corridors. We will try to make your stay comfortable, though you must understand that we are still learning what humans require." Jake nodded respectfully. "I appreciate your hospitality. I will try not to be too much trouble." A small smile appeared on Elder Vex's face, barely visible but there. "If you were no trouble, you would not be here. Nova has spoken extensively about human adaptability and resilience. We are eager to observe these qualities firsthand." The Keshatar had prepared quarters for Jake that were, in a word, bizarre. They had clearly tried to accommodate human needs, but their understanding of what humans found comfortable was theoretical at best. The bed was the right size but made of material that felt like cool glass. The lighting was adjustable but seemed to exist in spectrums that human eyes could only partially perceive. There was a bathroom, at least, though the facilities were clearly designed for someone with different physiology. Nova helped him adjust things, her familiarity with both human and Keshatar requirements making her the perfect intermediary. "It is not home," she admitted, "but you will adapt. You always do." Jake found himself wondering, not for the first time, when his home had stopped being a place and started being a person. The first few days were an exercise in culture shock. The Keshatar operated on schedules that made no sense to his human circadian rhythms. They ate, if you could call it eating, substances that looked like liquid light and tasted like nothing Jake had ever experienced. They communicated as much through their bioluminescent patterns as through words, and Jake constantly felt like he was missing half the conversation. But he watched and learned. Nova stayed close, translating not just language but context and meaning. When a young Keshatar named Zara asked Jake why humans formed permanent mating pairs, Nova explained the question's deeper meaning, that the Keshatar had stopped forming such bonds generations ago and were trying to understand what they had lost. Jake answered honestly, describing human relationships in terms of choice and commitment and the decision to face life's challenges together rather than alone. The Keshatar listened with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable, as if his words were precious data to be analyzed and cataloged. The breakthrough came during a discussion about human art. One of the Keshatar scientists, a male named Kieran, asked why humans created things that served no practical purpose. Why paint pictures, why write stories, why make music when none of these things contributed to survival? Jake thought about it for a long moment. "Because survival is not enough," he finally said. "Humans need meaning, purpose, beauty. We need to express what we feel and connect with others who feel the same way. Art is how we share our inner worlds, how we say things that words cannot capture." Kieran was silent, their patterns flickering in what Nova later told him was profound thought. That evening, Kieran brought Jake a small object, a crystalline sculpture that caught light and bent it into impossible patterns. "I made this," Kieran said quietly, "after our conversation. I have not created anything without purpose in over 200 years. But your words made me want to try. I do not know if this is art, but it felt important to make it." Jake held the sculpture carefully, understanding that he was holding more than just a beautiful object. He was holding proof that the Keshatar could change, could reconnect with parts of themselves they thought were lost forever. "It is beautiful," Jake said honestly. "Thank you for sharing it with me." Kieran's markings brightened with what could only be pleasure, and Jake realized he had just witnessed something rare and precious. A Keshatar experiencing joy in creation. That night, Nova found Jake in his quarters staring at Kieran's sculpture. "You are doing more than you know." she said softly. My people are starting to remember what it feels like to care about something beyond logic and efficiency. They are starting to feel again. Jake set the sculpture down carefully. Is that what you want? For them to become more like humans? Nova shook her head. I want them to become more like themselves. The Keshtar we were before we forgot how to connect. Before we let our advancements separate us from each other. You are showing them the path back. She sat beside him close enough that their shoulders touched. And you are showing me that choosing connection over isolation was the right decision. Every day I spend with you confirms that the bond between us is not a weakness, but the greatest strength I have ever known. Jake took her hand, feeling the familiar electric tingle of their connection. So what happens when the exchange period is over? Do you go back to being a proper Keshtar? All logic and efficiency? Nova laughed, a sound like wind chimes that made her whole face light up. I think we both know I can never go back to what I was. You changed me, Jake Morrison, and I would not undo that change for anything in the galaxy. 3 months into Jake's stay aboard the Luminous Path, something extraordinary began to happen. The Keshtar were changing. It was subtle at first. Small things that only someone paying close attention would notice. Scientists started gathering in groups to eat their liquid light meals together, instead of consuming them efficiently in isolation. Engineers began decorating their workstations with small personal items, objects that served no purpose except to please them. And most significantly, 2 Keshatar, a scientist named Lyra and a navigator named Tal, formed a bond pair. It was the first such pairing in over 2 centuries. Nova told Jake about it one evening with barely contained excitement. They came to me for advice. They wanted to know how to navigate a relationship when neither of them remembers what their ancestors did. I told them to figure it out together, to make mistakes and learn and not worry about doing it perfectly. Jake felt a swell of pride that surprised him with its intensity. This was what they had been trying to achieve, proof that the Keshatar could reclaim what they had lost. Your people are healing, he said. Nova nodded, but her expression was complicated. They are beginning to. But there is resistance too. Elder Vex supports the changes, but not all the elders agree. Some believe we should remain as we are, that emotions and bonds are the weaknesses that limited our ancestors. They fear that if we become too much like humans, we will lose what makes us Keshatar. It was a fair concern, Jake had to admit. Change was always frightening, especially for a species that had spent millennia perfecting their emotional control. But he also knew that without change, the Keshatar would continue their slow march toward extinction. The situation came to a head during a council meeting that Jake was invited to observe. The elders gathered in a chamber that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its walls showing star fields that could have been real-time views or historical data or something else entirely. Jake sat beside Nova, feeling completely out of his depth as the Keshatar debated in their melodic language, their bioluminescent patterns flashing in complex arguments that the universal translator struggled to keep up with. Elder Vex spoke in favor of continuing the exchange program, citing the positive changes already observed. But another elder, one named Saren with patterns that glowed cold white, argued passionately against it. We are becoming diluted, Saren said. Look at Scout Nova. She has bonded herself to a being who will die in less than a century. When he is gone, she will experience grief, pain, suffering. These are things we evolved beyond. Why would we willingly embrace them again? Before Nova could respond, Jake stood up. He had no idea if speaking was permitted, but he could not stay silent. With respect, Elder Saren, you did not evolve beyond those feelings. You suppressed them. There is a difference. The chamber went silent. Every Keshtar turned to look at him, and Jake felt the weight of their attention like physical pressure. But he had started this and he would finish it. Grief and pain are not weaknesses. They are the price we pay for love and connection. Yes, I will die long before Nova does, and yes, that will cause her pain. But the alternative is that we never connect at all, that we exist in isolation to avoid the risk of loss. Is that really living? Or is it just slowly fading away while calling it perfection? Elder Saren's patterns flickered rapidly. You are young and ignorant, human. You cannot understand what the Keshatar have achieved. We have conquered death, eliminated disease, created a civilization of pure logic and efficiency. Maybe, Jake said quietly. But you have also stopped growing. You have stopped creating. You have stopped reproducing. In another 1,000 years, the Keshatar will be extinct, And all that perfect logic and efficiency will mean nothing, because there will be no one left to appreciate it. The brutal honesty of his words seemed to shock the chamber into stillness. Then Elder Vex spoke. The human is correct. We have been dying slowly for so long that we stopped recognizing it as death. The changes we are observing in our people, the bonds forming, the emotions resurging, these are not corruption. They are revival. We are remembering how to be alive. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, the vote was in favor of continuing the exchange program. More than that, the council voted to expand it, to bring more Keshatar to human ships and more humans to Keshtar vessels. It was the first step toward a true alliance between species. That night, Nova found Jake in the observation deck, his favorite spot on the ship. The view from the luminous path was spectacular, showing nebulae and star clusters that human telescopes had never seen. He was thinking about home, about the horizon dawn, about the life he had left behind for this strange new existence. You spoke well today, Nova said, settling beside him. Elder Saren will likely never forgive you for calling their entire civilization a slow death. But you were not wrong. Jake smiled tiredly. I probably could have been more diplomatic about it. Nova reached for his hand, and the electric tingle of their connection flowed between them. You were honest. That is more valuable than diplomacy. And you reminded my people of something crucial, that existence without meaning is not worth preserving. She was quiet for a moment, watching the stars. I have been thinking about what you said, about me experiencing grief when you die. It terrified me at first, the thought of that pain. But then I realized something. Grief is just love with nowhere to go, and I would rather love you and lose you than never know what this feels like. Jake turned to look at her, seeing the genuine emotion in her eyes and the warm glow of her markings. When did this stop being about a life debt? When did it become about actual love? Nova smiled. For me, it was when you woke from that nightmare and I realized I would do anything to keep you from being afraid. When I understood that your well-being mattered more to me than my own survival. That is when I knew the bond had become something deeper. For Jake, the realization hit him all at once. He had been falling for her slowly, in pieces, every day that they spent together. Her intelligence, her dry humor, her fierce protectiveness, the way she looked at the universe with wonder despite having seen so much of it. He had been in love with her for weeks, maybe months, and had been too focused on cultural exchange and diplomatic success to recognize it. I love you, he said, and the words felt both terrifying and necessary. I do not know how this works. An alien and a human, someone who will live centuries and someone who has decades at best. But I know that what I feel for you is real, and I do not want to pretend otherwise. Nova's markings blazed bright enough to illuminate the entire observation deck. The Keshatar have a word, she said softly. Kelishta. It means the one who makes existence meaningful. I have loved you since the moment you pulled me from toxic water, Jake Morrison. You are my Kaleshita, and nothing in this galaxy will change that. They kissed then, and Jake felt electricity arc between them, not from her bioluminescence but from the sheer intensity of their connection. It was clumsy and awkward because their physiologies were different, but it was also perfect because it was theirs. When they pulled apart, Nova was smiling in a way Jake had never seen before. Unguarded and joyful and completely alive. The stars are beautiful tonight, she said, but not as beautiful as this moment, Jake agreed. For the first time since leaving the Horizon Dawn, he felt completely at home, not because of where he was, but because of who he was with. The exchange program continued for another 6 months, and during that time, the Keshatar underwent a transformation that would have been unthinkable a year before. More bondings formed. Children were conceived, the first in over a century. Art and music and creative expression returned to a species that had almost forgotten such things existed. And at the center of it all were Jake and Nova, proof that connections between vastly different beings were not just possible, but powerful. When the time finally came to return to the Horizon Dawn, Jake felt conflicted. He had grown to appreciate the Keshatar, to understand their unique perspective on existence, but he also missed humanity. Missed the chaos and emotion and stubborn optimism of his own people. Nova made the decision easy. Wherever you go, I go, she said simply. We are bonded, and that bond is not limited by which ship we stand on. Captain Harris welcomed them back with a smile and immediate promotion. Jake was now officially humanity's Keshatar liaison, with Nova as his permanent partner. The crew of the Horizon Dawn had their own Keshatar observers now. 3 scientists who were adapting to human culture with varying degrees of success. The ship had become a true meeting ground of species, messy and complicated and absolutely beautiful. Dr. Park pulled Jake aside for a checkup and was stunned by the results. Your integration with Keshatar biotechnology has accelerated. You are processing information at rates that should be impossible for human neurology. Your lifespan projections have doubled, possibly tripled. The bond is not just emotional, Jake, it is changing you on every level. Jake thought about that as he lay in his quarters that night, Nova curled beside him in sleep. He was no longer fully human, not in the way he had been before. But he was also no longer the limited being who had pulled a dying alien from toxic water. He was something new, something unprecedented. 6 months after the incident with the Void corruption, the Horizon Dawn received a transmission that changed everything. It was from Earth, from the Colonial Authority itself, and it bore news that made Captain Harris call an immediate meeting of all senior staff. Jake and Nova stood in the briefing room along with the rest of the command crew and their Keshatar partners. The holographic display showed an official from Earth wearing the formal uniform of the Colonial Administrator, a woman named Director Lauren Hayes, Captain Harris. Lieutenant Morrison honored Keshatar guests. The director began, "We have been monitoring your mission with great interest. The integration program you have pioneered has exceeded all expectations. The data you have transmitted about Keshatar technology, combined with their insights into human resilience and adaptability, has already begun to transform both our societies." She paused and a smile crossed her face. "Which is why we are authorizing the creation of something unprecedented, a joint colony to be established on the world you have designated Eden. It will be administered jointly by human and Keshatar authorities, with equal representation from both species. And we would like Lieutenant Morrison and Scout Nova to serve as the colony's first liaison officers." The briefing room erupted in excited conversation. A joint colony was beyond anything anyone had imagined. It was not just cooperation, but true integration, humans and Keshatar building a society together from the ground up. Jake felt Nova's hand slip into his and he squeezed it gently. "Are you ready for this?" he asked quietly. Nova's markings pulsed with warm golden light. "I have been ready since the moment you pulled me from that toxic water. Everything since then has been leading to this." The next few months were a whirlwind of preparation. Supply ships arrived from Earth carrying colonists' equipment and materials. Keshatar vessels brought their own people, including several bonded pairs who wanted to raise children in this new mixed society. Eden's surface became a construction zone as humans and Keshatar worked side by side to build something neither species had ever attempted before. Jake found himself constantly busy, mediating disputes, solving logistical problems, helping humans and Keshatar understand each other's needs and expectations. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Nova was beside him through all of it, her knowledge and diplomatic skills making her invaluable. Dr. Park established the colony's first medical facility, one that could treat both human and Keshatar patients. She made breakthrough after breakthrough in comparative medicine, finding ways to adapt each species' medical advances for the other. Human lifespans increased dramatically with Keshatar cellular enhancement, while Keshatar learned to manage emotions and stress from human psychological techniques. Greg Patterson trained the colony's security force, a mixed unit of humans and Keshatar that had to learn to work together despite vastly different approaches to peacekeeping. The humans wanted rules and procedures. The Keshatar preferred logic and efficiency. Somehow Greg made it work, creating a security doctrine that combined the best of both. The first permanent structures went up in what they were calling Central Plaza, a mix of human and Keshatar architectural styles that looked like nothing either species had built before. Buildings with flowing Keshatar curves were supported by human engineering principles. Human aesthetics merged with Keshatar functionality. It was strange and beautiful and exactly right. But the real test came 6 months into the colony's establishment, when the first mixed family was formed. A human engineer named Ben Collins and a Keshatar scientist named Lyra announced their intention to form a permanent bond pair, adopting human marriage traditions modified for Keshatar understanding. Jake and Nova were asked to officiate the ceremony, which felt both humbling and terrifying. How do you marry two beings from different species when neither set of traditions quite fits? Nova solved it with typical elegance. "We create new traditions," she said. "That is what this colony is about." Not humans trying to be Keshatar or Keshtar trying to be human, but both becoming something new together. The ceremony was held in Central Plaza at sunset, and it felt like the entire colony attended. Humans and Keshatar stood together, watching as Ben and Lyra exchanged vows that acknowledged their differences and celebrated them. When Jake pronounced them bonded in the sight of two species, the cheering that erupted was in multiple languages and frequencies, a sound of pure joy that transcended words. That night, Jake and Nova stood on the balcony of their quarters, looking out over the colony they had helped build. Lights were coming on across the settlement as evening fell, human technology and Keshatar bioluminescence creating a unique glow in the darkness. "Do you remember what you said to me when we first met?" Nova asked quietly. "You said everything was going to be okay, that I was safe, that you were Jake and I was going to be fine." Jake smiled at the memory. "I had no idea what I was getting into." Nova laughed, that crystal chime sound he loved. "Neither did I. I thought the bond would be temporary, a biological quirk that would fade once I recovered. I never imagined it would become this." She gestured to the colony spreading out before them. "All of this exists because you refused to let me die in that toxic water. Every human Keshtar partnership, every mixed family, every breakthrough in cooperation, it all traces back to one human who saw someone drowning and decided that saving them was more important than following rules." Jake pulled her close. "And it all traces back to one Keshatar who chose to trust that human, who decided to stay and teach her people how to feel again. We did this together, Nova. Everything that followed that rescue was a choice we both made." Nova's markings flared bright. "I would make the same choice again every time, in every universe, in every dimension. You are my Kelishta, Jake Morrison, now and always." They stood in comfortable silence, watching their colony thrive. Below them, human children played with Keshatar younglings, learning each other's games and inventing new ones. Scientists from both species worked late in their labs, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Families, both single species and mixed, settled in for the evening, secure in the knowledge that they were part of something unprecedented. The Horizon Dawn still orbited above them, Captain Harris having chosen to stay and oversee the colony's protection. The Keshtar fleet maintained its presence as well, no longer observers but full partners in humanity's expansion to the stars. And somewhere in the outer system, the void corruption drifted peacefully, a reminder that even beings from other dimensions could find their place if given understanding and help. Jake thought about his father, the rescue worker who had taught him that hesitation killed more people than action. The old man would have been proud to see what that lesson had built. One impulsive rescue had become a colony, an alliance, a new way of being that neither humans nor Keshatar had imagined possible. "Your people are thriving," Jake said to Nova. "Birth rates are up across the Keshatar settlements. Elder Vex told me they are projecting population growth for the first time in 3 centuries. Nova nodded. "And your people are benefiting from Keshatar technology in ways that will reshape human civilization. Medical advances, energy systems, dimensional physics. We are making each other better." She turned to look at him, her amber eyes reflecting the lights of the colony. "But more than that, we are making each other whole. Humans are learning to see beyond the physical. Keshtar are learning to feel deeply again. We are both becoming what we could not be alone." Jake kissed her, feeling the electric spark that still thrilled him every time they touched. "So what happens next? What do we do after we have built a successful colony and proved that human Keshtar integration works?" Nova's smile was mischievous. "We keep going. There is an entire galaxy out there, Jake, full of species we have not met, worlds we have not seen, connections we have not made. This colony is just the beginning." Over the next year, that vision began to take shape. Other species, hearing about the human Keshatar alliance, started making contact. Some were curious, some were cautious, but all were intrigued by the idea that such different beings could not just coexist but truly integrate. Eden became a hub for interspecies diplomacy, with Jake and Nova at the center of it all. They were no longer just a human lieutenant and a Keshatar scout. They were symbols of what was possible when beings chose connection over isolation, when they refused to let differences become barriers. They were proof that bonds between wildly different forms of life could not only exist, but thrive and transform everyone involved. Dr. Park completed her research into human Keshtar cellular integration and published findings that revolutionized medicine for both species. Humans could now expect to live for centuries with Keshtar cellular enhancement. Keshtar could experience emotions and form bonds without losing their logical capabilities. It was not perfect, and there were still challenges to overcome, but it was progress. Greg Patterson, improbably, formed a bond pair with a Keshatar tactical specialist named Shen. The two of them were a formidable team, combining human instinct with Keshatar precision in ways that made them the colony's most effective security officers. Greg claimed he was only doing it for professional reasons. The Horizon Dawn hung in orbit above a newly discovered world, catalogued simply as HD 276382C but nicknamed Eden by the crew for its remarkable similarity to Earth. Captain Harris had called a meeting of all senior staff and their Keshatar counterparts, and the briefing room was crowded with both humans and aliens working side by side. Jake stood beside Nova, their partnership now so natural that no one questioned it anymore. The mission briefing was straightforward enough. Eden showed signs of previous habitation, ruins of some kind scattered across its largest continent. The signatures did not match any known species, human or Keshatar. Captain Harris wanted to send a joint survey team to investigate. "Jake, you will lead the human contingent," the captain said. "Nova, I assume you will be accompanying him." Nova nodded, and Jake saw several of the crew smile. His inability to go anywhere without his bonded partner had become a running joke aboard the ship. But it was a joke told with affection, rather than mockery. The survey team assembled in the shuttle bay at dawn ship time. Besides Jake and Nova, there was Dr. Ellen Park, Greg Patterson for security, a Keshtar archaeologist named Ven, and a Keshatar engineer named Kira. It was a good mix of skills and species, exactly the kind of cooperation that would have been impossible a year ago. The flight down to Eden's surface was smooth, and the planet was as beautiful as its nickname suggested. Blue skies, green vegetation that was close enough to Earth plants to be familiar but different enough to be exotic. The air was breathable for humans, and the Keshatar adapted to it without difficulty. The ruins were located in a valley surrounded by mountains, and from the air they looked like nothing more than weathered stone formations. But as the shuttle descended, their artificial nature became obvious. These were buildings, or had been once, constructed by hands that understood architecture and engineering. The team landed in a clearing near the edge of the ruins and began their survey. Dr. Park used her portable lab to analyze the stone composition, while Ven studied the architectural patterns. Jake and Greg did a security sweep of the perimeter, while Nova and Kira examined what looked like it might have been a power generation facility. Everything proceeded normally for about 3 hours. Then Nova stopped moving, her entire body going rigid, her markings flashing red in a pattern Jake had learned to recognize as alarm. "The void corruption," she said, her voice tight with fear. "It is here." Jake felt his blood run cold. They had not encountered the void corruption since that first time on the Horizon Dawn, when Nova and Jake had barely managed to calm it enough to make it withdraw. The entity was supposed to be contained, monitored, kept away from populated areas. "What is it doing here?" "Everyone back to the shuttle," Greg barked, but it was already too late. The sky tore open, not literally, but that was the only way Jake's human mind could process what he was seeing. Reality itself seemed to split, and through the wound came the corruption, larger and more unstable than before. It was a writhing mass of darkness and impossible geometries, existing partially in their dimension and partially somewhere else. The air around it bent and twisted, and Jake felt nauseous just looking at it. The entity moved toward them with terrible purpose, and this time its attention was not on Nova. It was focused on the ruins, specifically on the ancient power facility that Nova and Kira had been examining. "It wants the technology," Nova said, understanding dawning in her voice. "This was a Keshatar outpost thousands of years ago. We abandoned it, but the power systems are still functional. It wants to feed." Jake made a decision in less than a second. "Everyone except Nova, get back to the shuttle. Get it airborne and ready to pull us out if this goes wrong." Greg started to argue, but Jake cut him off. "That is an order, Chief. Move." The team retreated reluctantly, leaving Jake and Nova standing alone between the void corruption and the ancient technology it hungered for. Jake took Nova's hand, feeling their connection snap into place with familiar intensity. "Like before?" he asked, and Nova nodded. "Like before, but stronger. It is more desperate now, more dangerous." They reached out together, their combined consciousness expanding beyond their physical forms. Jake felt Nova's presence in his mind, vast and ancient and utterly focused. He poured his humanity into the link, his emotions and empathy and stubborn refusal to give up. Together they created something neither could achieve alone, a bridge of understanding between human and Keshatar and something beyond both. The void corruption screamed, that bone-deep sound that existed in frequencies no ear could hear. But this time Jake understood it better. The entity was not evil or malicious. It was lost and hurting, a being from another dimension where the rules of physics were completely different. In its own realm it had been something beautiful, something necessary. Here it was a monster, and it knew that. Nova and Jake did not try to fight it or seal it away. They offered understanding, and more than that, they offered help. Through their link, they showed the entity what they had learned about coexistence, about finding ways to survive in places you did not belong. And then Jake had an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. What if we could help it adapt? He asked Nova through their mental connection. The Keshtar have technology that works across dimensions. What if we could modify the entity's energy signature so it could exist here without consuming everything it touches? Nova's response was immediate fascination. It would require direct interface with the corruption's core structure. Extremely dangerous, possibly fatal. Jake felt her determination through the bond. But if we succeed, we could save it. We could give it a true place in this universe instead of just a prison. They did not debate it further. Together they moved forward, walking into the heart of the void corruption. The experience was indescribable. Jake felt his body dissolving and reforming, felt his consciousness spread across multiple dimensions. He saw the entity's true form, and it was not monstrous at all. It was elegant and complex, a being of pure mathematics and energy that existed in states humans had never imagined. Nova worked with precision that took his breath away, her Keshatar knowledge allowing her to understand the entity's structure on a fundamental level. Jake provided the emotional grounding, the connection that kept them both anchored to their home dimension, while they operated in realms that should have torn them apart. Time became meaningless. It could have been seconds or hours or days. But eventually they succeeded. The void corruption stabilized, its energy signature shifting to something that could coexist with normal space-time. It would never be completely safe, never be fully understood, but it was no longer a threat. It was simply another form of life, strange and powerful and worthy of existence. When Jake and Nova stumbled out of the entity's sphere of influence, they found Greg and Dr. Park waiting with weapons drawn and medical equipment at the ready. But there was no need for either. The void corruption had withdrawn peacefully, settling into a stable orbit around Eden where it could exist without harming anything. Nova collapsed, her energy completely spent, and Jake caught her. He was not in much better shape himself, his human body pushed far beyond its limits by the dimensional travel. But they were alive, and they had done something impossible. "You two are absolutely insane," Greg said, but his voice was full of respect. "Completely, utterly insane." Jake managed a tired smile. "That seems to be our specialty." They made it back to the shuttle, and from there to the Horizon Dawn. Dr. Park kept them both in medical bay for 3 days, running tests and fussing over readings that made no sense. "You are more machine than human now," she told Jake at one point. "Your cells have integrated Keshatar nanotechnology at a level I cannot even fully measure. And Nova, your energy patterns are showing human neurological signatures. You are both changing each other." When they were finally released from medical, Captain Harris called them to her ready room. "What you two did down there," she said slowly, "that was beyond the scope of our mission parameters. It was reckless and dangerous and could have gotten you both killed." She paused, and a small smile crossed her face. "It was also the bravest damn thing I have ever seen. You did not just save us from the corruption. You saved it from being something it did not choose to be." Jake and Nova exchanged glances. They had not thought about it in those terms, but the captain was right. They had given the corruption choice, the same thing Nova had given herself when she decided to stay with Jake instead of returning to her people. News of their success spread quickly through both human and Keshtar communities. The void corruption, once feared as an unstoppable threat, was now understood as a refugee from another dimension. Scientists from both species were already proposing joint studies, ways to understand and possibly help other dimensional anomalies. And at the center of it all were Jake and Nova. The unlikely partnership that had proven connections between different forms of life were not just possible, but transformative. That night, lying in their shared quarters, Jake asked Nova something that had been bothering him. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing to stay with me instead of returning to your people?" Nova was quiet for a moment, her markings pulsing gently in the darkness.